The notice wasn't slipped under the door. It was taped to it. Bright white paper, aggressively straight, placed at eye level like a warning instead of information. The bolded words at the top jumped out before anything else. Final notice. Lease violation. Marcus Reed stood in the hallway staring at it, grocery bags cutting into his fingers. He hadn't even unlocked the door yet. Marcus was black, 34, an IT support specialist who worked mostly from home, quiet, predictable. The kind of tenant apartment managers usually forgot existed, paid rent early, didn't throw parties, didn't complain, which was why the paper made no sense. He pulled it off the door slowly and scanned it. Unauthorized use of unit excessive noise complaints. Failure to comply may result in eviction proceedings. Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Not panic, not fear. Something colder, sharper. Excessive noise, he said out loud, the hallway empty except for the hum of the lights. He unlocked the door and stepped inside his apartment. It was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Shoes by the door. Laptop closed on the desk. Ceiling fans spinning quietly. No music, no guests, no signs of whatever violation this was supposed to be. Marcus set the groceries down and read the notice again, slower this time. At the bottom was a signature, Karen Holt, property manager, and a timestamp. Posted 2:17 p.m. Marcus checked his phone. At 2:17 p.m, he'd been on a recorded work call. Headset on. Mic muted half the time. He had the meeting log to prove it. He exhaled slowly and walked to the window, looking out over the parking lot. The complex was calm, same as always. Kids riding bikes, someone grilling. A normal Tuesday evening. Nothing that justified a final notice. Marcus sat at the kitchen table and pulled out his lease binder. He kept it where he kept everything important, organized, labeled, untouched unless needed. Some people thought that was excessive. Marcus had learned differently. He flipped to the incident report section. There was none attached, just accusations. He checked the dates. The notice referenced multiple prior warnings. There hadn't been any. Not written, not emailed, not posted. Marcus knew because he saved everything. His phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. Unknown number. He played it. "This is Karen Holt from Building Management." A woman's voice said, "Tight, clipped, practiced. We've had enough issues with your unit. If this behavior continues, we will begin eviction proceedings immediately. I suggest you take this seriously." The call ended. Marcus stared at his phone. Enough issues. That phrase did a lot of work without saying anything at all. He called back, straight to voicemail. At 6:30 p.m, Marcus walked down to the leasing office. The glass door was open, lights on. Karen Holt stood behind the desk, mid-40s, white, hair pulled back severely, glasses perched low on her nose. She didn't look up right away. "I received a final notice today," Marcus said calmly. "I'd like to know what it's referring to." Karen looked up slowly. "Oh," she said. "You." Marcus waited. "We've received complaints," she continued. "Repeated ones." "From who?" Marcus asked. Karen sighed, already annoyed. "Other residents." "Which residents?" "We don't disclose that." "Okay," Marcus said. "What were the complaints?" Karen folded her arms. "Noise, people coming and going, non-residential use of the unit." Marcus blinked. "I live alone. I work from home." Karen tilted her head. "That's not what we've been told." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "I want the complaints in writing." Karen shook her head. "You're already on thin ice. This is your warning." "The notice says, final," Marcus replied, "which implies previous warnings. I haven't received any." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is how we're handling it." Marcus looked around the office. Security cameras in the corners, lease posters on the wall, one framed copy of the tenant handbook behind her. "Then I'd like a meeting," Marcus said, "with documentation." Karen laughed softly. "You should be more worried about keeping your apartment." Marcus met her eyes. "I am," he said. "That's why I'm asking for facts." Karen leaned back in her chair. "You don't have to argue. You just have to comply." Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Then I'll be bringing my lease." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "You can read it all you want. Violations are violations." Marcus turned to leave. As he did, Karen added casually, "And just so you know, evictions move fast." Marcus paused at the door. "Good," he said quietly. "So do records." He walked back to his apartment, closed the door behind him, and sat down at the table again, this time opening his lease binder all the way. Because if Karen Holt was confident enough to threaten eviction over nothing, then she hadn't read something important. And Marcus knew exactly where to find it. Marcus didn't skim the lease. He read it the way he always did, slowly, deliberately, pen in hand. The binder lay open on the kitchen table, pages neatly tabbed with color-coded flags. Utilities, maintenance, conduct, enforcement. He flipped past the sections he knew by heart and stopped at Section 9, Notices and Violations. His pen paused. He read it once, then again. Management must provide written notice of any alleged violation, including date, time, and specific conduct, and allow a cure period of no less than 10 days before issuing a final notice or initiating eviction proceedings. Marcus leaned back in his chair. 10 days, written notice, specific conduct, none of which had happened. He flipped to the next page. Anonymous complaints may not be used as sole justification for enforcement action without independent verification. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "So that's it," he murmured. Marcus turned to Section 12, Right to Contest. Tenant has the right to request documentation and a review meeting with management prior to any enforcement action. He underlined it once. Clean, precise. Karen Holt hadn't just skipped a step. She'd skipped the entire process. Marcus opened his laptop and began pulling records. Work calendar, meeting logs, call recordings with timestamps. At 2:17 p.m., the exact time the notice was posted, he'd been on a company Zoom call with 7 other people. Camera on, mic off, notes taken, automatically saved. He downloaded the meeting transcript, then he checked his smart thermostat history. No spikes, no unusual activity, just the steady, boring temperature of a quiet apartment. Next, he opened his building's resident portal and scrolled through notifications. Nothing. No warnings, no messages. He took screenshots of everything, not because he expected to need them, because he'd learned that people who skipped rules often counted on others not knowing them. The next morning, Marcus sent an email. Clear subject line. Request for documentation. Alleged lease violations. He addressed it to Karen Holt, CCing the regional management office listed at the bottom of every rent receipt. Dear Miss Holt, I am requesting written documentation of the alleged violations referenced in the notice posted on my door on date, including dates, times, and specific conduct as required under Section 9 of the lease. I am also requesting confirmation of the cure period prior to issuance of a final notice. Please advise on scheduling a review meeting per Section 12. He attached nothing. Not yet. He sent it at 8:12 a.m. Then he waited. Karen didn't reply. At noon, Marcus received a different message, this one through the resident portal. Reminder, lease violations may result in eviction. No details, no response to his questions, just pressure. Marcus smiled faintly. He printed the portal message and slid it into the binder. That afternoon, a knock came at his door. Firm, familiar. Marcus opened it to find Karen standing there, clipboard in hand, smile tight. "We need to talk," she said. Marcus stepped aside. "Come in." Karen hesitated, just a second, then entered. She didn't sit. "This doesn't need to be complicated," she said. "We're trying to maintain standards." "I agree," Marcus replied. "That's why I asked for documentation." Karen sighed. "Marcus, I've been doing this a long time. When multiple residents complain, we act. According to the lease, Marcus said, calmly opening the binder on the table, you document first. Karen waved a hand. Leases are guidelines. Marcus looked up. They're contracts. The word landed harder than he expected. Karen's smile thinned. You're being difficult. Marcus nodded. I'm being precise. Karen tapped her clipboard. You don't want this to escalate. Marcus slid the binder toward her and opened it to the flagged page. I don't, he said. That's why I'd like you to read this out loud. Karen glanced down. Her eyes skimmed the paragraph. She frowned. Section 9, Marcus said gently. Second sentence. Karen's lips moved silently as she reread it. The room felt very quiet. She cleared her throat. This doesn't mean... It means, Marcus interrupted, still calm, that a final notice without prior written warning is not valid. Karen straightened. We can issue one now, Marcus shook his head. You can issue an initial notice, with specifics, and a cure period. Karen stared at him, irritation flashing briefly before she masked it again. And if we still decide to move forward? She asked. Marcus met her gaze. Then I'll bring this lease, he said, to the hearing. Silence stretched between them. Karen closed the binder slowly. We'll be in touch, she said. Marcus nodded. I look forward to the documentation. After she left, Marcus sat back down and added one more tab to the binder. Dispute, because the threat of eviction had been loud. But the lease was very clear. Karen Holt didn't contact Marcus the next day, or the day after that. The building stayed quiet, almost carefully so, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see who would blink first. No new notices appeared on Marcus's door. No emails arrived explaining the multiple complaints. The silence felt intentional, not corrective. Marcus didn't relax. He'd learned that silence from management often meant someone was deciding how to reframe a mistake. On the third morning, his phone buzzed with a calendar notification he hadn't created. Mandatory compliance meeting, leasing office, 4 p.m. No agenda. No explanation. Just a time and a place. Marcus closed the notification and added his own note beneath it. Bring lease. Bring records. At 3:55 p.m, he walked into the leasing office carrying the same binder, now thicker by several pages. Karen was already there, seated stiffly at the small conference table. Beside her sat a man Marcus hadn't met before. White, early 50s, suit jacket draped over the back of his chair like he wasn't planning to stay long. This is Paul, Karen said curtly. Regional compliance. Paul offered a thin smile. Mr. Reed. Marcus nodded and took the empty chair across from them. He set the binder on the table between them, centered, deliberate. Paul folded his hands. We wanted to clear up some confusion. I agree, Marcus said. There's been quite a bit of that. Karen's jaw tightened. We've received ongoing concerns about your unit. Noise, visitors, potential business activity. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He opened the binder instead, flipped to a tab, and slid a printed page across the table. This is my work schedule, he said calmly. Remote, standard hours, no clients, no visitors beyond the occasional friend, which is permitted under the lease. Paul glanced at the page, then back at Karen. These complaints go back weeks, Karen said. We can't ignore patterns. Patterns require documentation, Marcus replied. Which I've requested, repeatedly. Paul leaned back slightly. Karen may have moved too quickly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's one way to put it. Karen shot Paul a look. We're not rescinding the notice. Marcus nodded. I didn't ask you to. I asked you to justify it. He opened the binder again and turned it toward them, finger resting on the highlighted paragraph. Section 9, he said. Notice requirements. Karen crossed her arms. We're aware. Then I'd like to hear, Marcus continued evenly, the dates and times of the alleged violations. Paul cleared his throat. The complaints were general. Marcus waited. Evening noise, Karen said finally. People coming and going. Marcus leaned forward slightly. At what times? Karen hesitated. After hours. Which hours? Marcus asked. Paul interjected. Marcus, we're trying to resolve this without escalating. Marcus met his gaze. So am I. That's why I'm asking for specifics. Silence filled the room again, heavier this time. Marcus reached into the binder and pulled out another sheet. This is my call log for the date listed on the final notice. I was on a recorded meeting at the exact time the notice claims the violation occurred. Paul took the page, scanned it, then frowned. Karen looked away. And this, Marcus continued, sliding another document forward, is the thermostat history showing no unusual activity, no volume spikes, no parties, nothing. Paul exhaled slowly. Karen, she shifted in her chair. Other residents felt disturbed. Feelings aren't violations, Marcus said, not unkindly. The lease is specific. Karen's voice sharpened. Are you saying the complaints are fake? Marcus held her gaze. I'm saying they're unverified, and under the lease, that matters. Paul closed the folder in front of him and looked directly at Marcus. If we withdraw the final notice and issue an initial notice instead, would that be acceptable? Marcus considered this for a moment. If the initial notice includes dates, times, and a cure period, as required, Karen's head snapped up. That still puts him on record. Marcus didn't flinch. I'm already on record. Incorrectly. Paul nodded slowly. We can amend the file. Karen opened her mouth to protest, then stopped. And, Marcus added, I want confirmation in writing that anonymous complaints alone won't be used to threaten eviction. Paul looked thoughtful. That's already policy. Then it shouldn't be a problem to restate it, Marcus replied. Another pause. Paul stood. We'll draft a revised notice. You'll receive it by end of day. Marcus closed the binder. I appreciate that. Karen stood as well, her movements stiff, controlled. This isn't over. Marcus looked at her calmly. I know. That's why I brought the lease. As he left the office, Marcus felt the familiar mix of exhaustion and clarity settle in. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't accused anyone of anything they couldn't defend. He'd simply asked them to read their own contract out loud. And now, whatever came next would have to pass through the same language Karen Holt had tried to ignore. The revised notice arrived at 6:18 p.m., not taped to the door this time, emailed, attached as a PDF. Marcus opened it slowly, reading every line the way he always did. Initial notice of concern, final, no eviction language. It listed 2 vague time windows, both labelled pending verification, and, most importantly, it included a clearly stated 10-day cure period. At the bottom was a new paragraph that hadn't existed before. This notice does not constitute a determination of lease violation and may not be used as grounds for eviction without further documented review. Marcus leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. That sentence hadn't come from Karen. It had come from someone who understood risk. He saved the file, printed it, and slid it into the binder behind the dispute tab. 2 days later, another email followed. This one shorter, more careful. Following internal review, previous enforcement language has been withdrawn. Your tenant file has been updated to reflect this correction. We appreciate your cooperation. No apology, no admission. But the threat was gone. Over the next week, the building stayed quiet. No knocks, no warnings, no sudden emails about standards. Marcus went about his routine exactly as before. Work calls, evening walks, quiet dinners, the steady, unremarkable life he'd always lived. But something had changed. Karen Holt no longer made eye contact when they passed in the hallway. When she did speak, it was clipped, strictly procedural. She never mentioned noise again. One afternoon, Marcus saw a new notice posted near the mailboxes. Reminder: lease enforcement requires documentation and cure periods as outlined in Section 9. Marcus read it once, then smiled. A month later, Marcus received a survey request from corporate management asking about his experience with on-site staff. He didn't rush it. When he finally filled it out, he kept it factual, calm, precise. He mentioned the initial notice, the lack of documentation, the meeting, the lease clause. He didn't use the word threatened. He didn't have to. On a quiet Saturday morning, Marcus sat at his kitchen table again, binder open, reorganizing tabs. He moved dispute to the back and added a new one in front of it. Resolved. He paused, pen hovering, then wrote a date beside it. Not because he trusted the system now, but because he trusted himself. Marcus closed the binder and slid it back onto the shelf. The apartment was silent, peacefully, unquestionably silent. And for the first time since that white notice had appeared on his door, Marcus felt something close to satisfaction. Not because he'd won, but because when the pressure came, when the threat was loud and vague and meant to make him shrink, he hadn't argued, he hadn't begged, he'd simply asked them to read the lease, out loud, and once the words were spoken, the eviction threat had nowhere left to stand.